The tow truck arrived at exactly 10:17 on a bright Tuesday morning, carrying a black luxury sedan that looked far too expensive to be sitting behind a dusty little repair shop on the edge of town. The woman who owned it had not come to claim it. She had not called to ask about the repairs. She had not even answered the mechanic's messages. For 3 months, the car had remained inside the shop, untouched and covered with a gray sheet. Everyone assumed the same thing. The wealthy CEO who owned it had simply decided the car was no longer worth her time. But when 38-year-old mechanic Silas Mercer finally opened the locked compartment hidden beneath the trunk lining, he found something that would make him question everything he believed about the woman who had abandoned it. If you believe everyone deserves kindness, second chances, and someone willing to look beyond appearances, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because sometimes the people who look like they have everything are secretly carrying the heaviest burdens. Silas Mercer owned a small family repair shop called Mercer Auto Works, a clean but modest building surrounded by ordinary houses, grocery stores, and quiet streets. He had inherited the business from his grandfather, but keeping it alive had never been easy. The shop had 2 aging lifts, a small waiting room, and equipment that Silas repaired almost as often as he repaired cars. He was raising his 8-year-old daughter, Maren, on his own, and every month he carefully balanced rent, school expenses, utility bills, and the cost of keeping the business open. He did not complain. He simply worked longer hours. One sunny morning, a black luxury sedan arrived on a flatbed truck. Its owner was listed as Seraphina, the 42-year-old CEO of a rapidly growing technology company. The car had suffered a serious electrical failure, and the dealership had estimated a repair bill so large that the owner had apparently refused to authorize the work. A message from her assistant instructed Silas to inspect the vehicle and contact them with the estimate. Silas expected the usual story. Wealthy customer, expensive car, expensive repair, maybe a difficult negotiation. But when he inspected it, something felt strange. The vehicle was not simply damaged. Several components had been disconnected with unusual care. The electrical system showed signs that someone had deliberately prevented the car from starting. There were no obvious signs of an accident, no major mechanical destruction, and nothing that explained why someone would abandon such an expensive vehicle. Silas ran diagnostic tests throughout the afternoon, checking every system twice. The problem seemed almost intentionally hidden. He called the number on the work order. No answer. He called again the next day. Nothing. Weeks passed. Then months. The car remained in the back of his shop, while Silas focused on paying customers. Every time he walked past it, curiosity grew. He eventually learned from an old invoice that the vehicle had been purchased several years earlier by Seraphina herself. She was famous in business magazines, appeared at conferences, and was known for building her company from a tiny office into a multi-million-dollar organization. To Silas, she seemed like someone who lived in a completely different world. One afternoon, while Maren was doing homework at a small table inside the shop, Silas decided to inspect the car again. Sunlight streamed through the open garage doors, illuminating dust particles in the air. He removed the trunk lining to check a wiring route that had been bothering him. Beneath the lining, he noticed a panel that did not appear in the vehicle's standard service diagrams. He stopped. Using a small tool, he carefully loosened the panel. Behind it was a narrow metal compartment. Inside sat a sealed envelope, an old photograph, and a small notebook wrapped in clear plastic. Silas stared at them for several seconds. The photograph showed a much younger Seraphina standing beside an older man in front of a tiny auto repair shop. The shop looked remarkably similar to his own. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten note dated nearly 20 years earlier. Silas read it slowly. The older man in the photograph was his grandfather. The discovery made no sense. He opened the notebook. Its pages contained handwritten records about cars, customers, mechanical repairs, and personal notes. The handwriting belonged to Seraphina's father, a mechanic named Orson Vale. Silas had heard his grandfather mention that name many times when he was a child. Orson had once worked with him before leaving town to start a business of his own. But the final pages were different. They contained a story. Years earlier, Orson Vale had been diagnosed with a serious illness. He knew he might not have much time left, and he worried about what would happen to his daughter. He had built a small emergency fund, and placed important documents inside the hidden compartment of the car. His plan was to give Seraphina access to it when she truly needed help. But life had changed before he could explain everything. Seraphina had become successful, but according to the notes, her relationship with her father had become complicated. She blamed him for leaving the family during difficult years. He had tried to reach her, but pride and misunderstanding kept them apart. The final page contained only one sentence. If she ever brings this car to a mechanic, please make sure she receives the truth, not just the keys. Silas sat quietly on the concrete floor. He suddenly understood why the car had been abandoned. Seraphina had not simply rejected a repair bill. She had been running from something. Silas contacted the number on the old paperwork and eventually reached a retired legal clerk who remembered Orsonvale. The clerk explained that the emergency fund had never been claimed because the required documents were still inside the vehicle. But there was something else. Orson had left a letter addressed to his daughter. Silas could have handed everything to a lawyer and walked away. Instead, he searched for Seraphina. Her company headquarters stood downtown in a glass building surrounded by bright offices and expensive cars. Silas arrived during the afternoon wearing his work clothes, carrying the sealed envelope in an old canvas bag. The receptionist looked skeptical when he explained why he was there. But when Seraphina finally entered the room, the confidence seen in business magazines disappeared from her face as soon as she saw the photograph. She recognized it instantly. Silas did not accuse her of abandoning the car. He did not ask why she had ignored the repair shop. He simply placed the photograph and notebook on the table. Seraphina sat down. For several minutes, she said nothing. Then she explained that she had spent years believing her father had chosen work over her. After his death, she had buried the anger because it was easier than admitting how much she missed him. When she discovered the car in storage after a family estate dispute, she sent it to a repair shop because she could not bring herself to look at it. When the dealership gave her an enormous repair estimate, she told her assistant to leave it somewhere and forget about it. She had never known about the hidden compartment. Silas handed her the letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it. He gave her privacy and stepped outside. Through the open office doors, the afternoon sunlight stretched across the polished floor. Cars moved along the street below, people hurried between buildings, and the city continued as if nothing important were happening. But inside that office, a daughter was finally learning that the story she had carried for years was incomplete. When Seraphina eventually came outside, her eyes were wet, but there was something different in her expression. Not the polished confidence of a CEO. Something more human. She asked Silas what he wanted for finding the documents. He told her nothing. He simply said that her father had trusted someone to make sure she received the truth. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. A few weeks later, Seraphina returned to Mercer Auto Works. This time she did not arrive with an assistant or a driver. She drove herself in a different car and walked into the small garage, carrying several boxes. Inside were professional diagnostic tools, replacement equipment, and supplies the struggling shop could never have afforded. Silas initially refused them. Seraphina explained that she was not trying to buy his gratitude. She had spent years building companies while ignoring the people and places that had helped shape her life. Her father had taught her that success meant nothing if you forgot who helped you stand when you were starting from the ground. She wanted the equipment donated to the shop in his memory. Silas accepted, but the biggest surprise came months later. Seraphina began funding a community automotive training program for young people who could not afford technical school. Silas became one of its instructors. His shop grew, but he never turned it into something cold or corporate. The waiting room remained simple. The old photographs stayed on the wall, and the black sedan that had started everything was eventually repaired. Seraphina did not sell it. She kept it. Every few months, she drove it back to the neighborhood where her father had once worked. Sometimes she stopped at Mercer Auto Works, where Marin would run outside to greet her. The car had arrived as an abandoned machine. It left as a reminder that sometimes people do not abandon objects because they are worthless. Sometimes they abandon them because they carry memories too painful to face. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to look a little deeper to uncover the truth. Years later, Silas placed a small plaque beside the entrance of his expanded shop. It read simply, "Every repair begins with listening." If this story touched your heart, please support this video with a like. Share it with someone who believes people deserve second chances, and leave a comment telling us what lesson you took from Silas and Seraphina's story. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment second chances below if you believe one act of kindness can change the direction of someone's life. Because the most valuable thing Silas found inside that abandoned car was not money, not documents, and not a forgotten fortune. He found a broken family story waiting for someone patient enough to repair it. And in the end, that was the greatest repair of all.